Welcome to Decimals Lesson 5. We've already discussed a few different ways that decimals are applicable in our lives. We've used the example of a race, we've used the example of money, and now we're going to take a look at the example of science. When scientists measure things, oftentimes they need a great deal of accuracy. What this means is that scientists have to be very precise, they have to be very accurate. There can be no doubt that they are measuring correctly. Consider the scientists working on the vaccine for COVID-19. It's extremely important that they're measuring accurately. And to do this, they need to use whole numbers as well as decimals. Since decimals are tiny parts of a whole number, they offer a great deal of precision and accuracy when we're measuring. One example of this that we've already used is the example of the stopwatch that only used whole numbers versus the stopwatch that used whole numbers as well as hundredths of a second. The stopwatch that used hundredths of a second is much more precise and much more accurate at measuring a runner who is running a short distance race such as the 100-meter dash. Let's circle back to the example of science and have a look at a few different decimals that are even more precise than the ones we've been looking at, the type of decimals that scientists might use in their measurements. In the corner of our screen here. Now, what do we notice about these particular decimals? That's absolutely right. There are more digits to the right of the decimal point. These decimals have 1, 2, 3 place values to the right of the decimal point. Let's consider exactly what this decimal means with its extra place value to the right of the decimal point. To do this, we will look back at our unit square. So, if the square is our unit, what does 1/10 look like? Take a second to think about that. 1/10 would look like one orange strip, one orange column. We know this because it would take 10 of them to fill in the entire square. Again, if the big square is our unit, what would 1/100th look like? Take a second to think about it. That's right, it would be one of these small squares, highlighted in yellow. The reason for that being, the square is divided into 100 equal parts, each of them this size. To quickly recap, we have shown tenths, we have shown hundredths, and now we want to show thousandths. So how would I show an amount like 4 thousandths? Well, it would look like this in standard decimal form. 0.004, which is the same thing as 4 thousandths. Here's a place value chart. Notice we have nothing in the ones place, the tenths place, the hundredths place, but we have a 4 in the thousandths place. Now, how would we show 4 thousandths in our grid? To figure it out, let's look back at our unit square. Starting with our unit square, we started by showing tenths. How did we do it? What did we do? Well, we divided our unit square into 10 equal parts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And to show hundredths, what did we do to that? We divided by 10 again. Each of these 10 parts are cut into 10 small pieces. So we have 100 equal pieces within our unit square grid. How would we further divide the square so that there are 1,000 equal pieces? Think about that for a minute. If you're not sure, think about each of these squares as a group. There's 100 groups. So if we have 100 groups of something, 100 groups of blank equals 1,000, what would go in each group? What would fill that blank? 100 groups of 10 is equal to 1,000. Which means that if we have 100 groups here, being each of these small squares within our unit square, we'd have to have 10 equal parts within each of those groups. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Which in effect means that we're dividing our 100 equal parts by 10 yet again. And here's how it would look. You can see where each of those 100 squares once were, and now each square has been divided into 10 equal parts. If we counted each of these teeny tiny parts up, there would be 1,000 equal parts within our unit square. The amount I've just colored in is 1,000th. Coloring in 1 out of 1,000 equal parts within our unit square grid. Let's show 423 thousandths colored in on our unit square grid. Let's begin with the tenths place. We have 4 in the tenths place. Next, we'll move to the hundredths place. We have 2 in the hundredths place. Now we'll move to the thousandths place. We have a 3 in the thousandths place. Remember that in order to show thousandths, we must divide each of the 100 equal squares into 10 equal parts. Since we only need to show 3 thousandths, I really only need to divide one of my 100 equal squares into 10 parts. Now I'll color in 3 thousandths. Each of those parts is 1,000th of an entire unit square grid. So there you have it, 423 thousandths, which is the same as 4 tenths plus 2 hundredths plus 3 thousandths, or shown in decimal form, 4 tenths plus 2 hundredths plus 3 thousandths. The 4 tenths is the same thing as 4 of these columns. 1/10 is one of these orange strips, and you can see clearly that if the whole unit square is divided into 1,000 equal parts, each of these squares has 10 equal parts. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, meaning 1/10 is 100 thousandths. 2 tenths is 200 thousandths. 3 tenths is 300 thousandths. 4 tenths is 400 thousandths. Moving on to the hundredths. 1/100th is the same as 10 thousandths. 2/100ths is the same as 20 thousandths. And finally, 3 thousandths is 3 thousandths. So we have 400 thousandths plus 20 thousandths plus 3 thousandths. Your independent work will look like this. You will have a unit square grid divided into 100 equal parts, next to which you will have a decimal in standard form. It will be your job to fill in the decimal shown in standard form onto the grid. So, with this first example, we have 304 thousandths. To hear me read each of the decimals, click on the audio button, which will appear on each slide. This decimal is 304 thousandths. Notice we have a 3 in the tenths place. So I go to my shapes, select a rectangle, just like before, and I want to shade in 3/10. So 1/10 would be here. I'm dragging 2/10, 3/10. Go to my paint bucket. I want to fill it in orange because orange is the color we're using to show tenths. Next, I have 0 in the hundredths place, so I do not need any yellow squares. Finally, 4 in the thousandths place. Each of our slides will have one of these, which you can use to overlay onto our 10 by 10 grid to more easily show thousandths. To show 4 thousandths, I will use a rectangle and I will cover up 4 of those parts. Each of these 4 tiny parts are 1/1000th of the entire grid. Now for my paint bucket, I want to use black to show my thousandths. So here I have 3/10 and 4 thousandths. Together makes 304 thousandths. Now you're ready to go to the next slide. Keep doing your very best.